here's a question that I often get. What happens if the number of lines in your data changes? I mean, if you're running student numbers and you have your formulas and everything set up and you're calculating average points on a certain assignment or something like that. Well, what happens if you get a new student in your class? Or what happens if you lose a couple of kids? Suddenly, that range no longer works because you have more or fewer cells. It's still going to look for the same cells, but some of them might be blank. Or you might have some additional lines that are not included. Well, we need those to be included also. So how do we deal with it if the size of your range needs to change? So for example, if I'm looking at the range type and I go to the very bottom of that range, which is way down here, okay? Type takes us all the way down to, let me do a different one. Let me do spec ed. Okay. So let's say, so there's our range for special education students. And if we look at the bottom, it takes me all the way down to 956, which is the bottom of the range. But what happens if I want to add some more schools? They're going to be down here, and they're not going to be a part of that range, which means I can put them in, but if I'm trying to come up with some information, they're not going to be included. So I've got to find a way to make that range either get bigger or smaller depending on how many lines of data I've got, right? Because over the course of a year or a semester or day, in some cases, the number of data lines might change. So our range has to be flexible in order to add or subtract rows. How do we do that? It's actually not too difficult. We're going to have to do a quick count of how many lines we've got total, and we have to adjust the definition for that range using our range, our name manager. So the first thing we need to know is, well, how many lines do we have? That number might go up, might go down, but how many are there? And there's a very easy way to do that, fortunately. And it's a little formula called count A. Count A, is very, very cool. So it's a counting formula. So count, right? How many? Count A, and this little A right here represents the word all. What count A does is it counts the number of cells that have something in them. So how many cells have a district name in it, for example? And all we're going to tell it is what's the range. And the result is going to be the total number of cells in that range that have something in them. Count all the cells in that range that have something in them. Well, let's take a look at our data. So here's our big enrollment data. We have a range called districts. Okay. And it's under column B. And it's all the districts. I'm going to be adding some lines, which means I'm going to have more districts, right? So what I can simply do is say, look, well, how many in that column there, how many rows have something in them? And when it gets to the bottom of the list down here in 956, well, the next one is a blank, and everyone after that is a blank. So the number of cells with something in them is going to be the number of districts or the number of lines, except for one. The first one is a column header. So we need to back that one out. If we look at all the cells in B that have something in them, all of them except for one, is going to be the name of a district. So here's how we do it. And it's actually really, really simple. So our formula is count A, and it's going to be everything in column B in this case. So here, we're going to look down the entire column B. Look down the entire column B. Tell me how many cells have something in them, except one of those cells is a header. It's not the name of a district, so we need to back it out. So we just minus 1, and that removes it from the count of districts. Let's try it. So I'm going to put that number up here. I'm going to just tuck it away. And you'll need to do this. If you're going to be doing a count A and then using that number somewhere else, you need to put it in your spreadsheet somewhere, and then you can refer back to it. So we're going to do equals count A, and we're going to look all the way, start column B all the way through column B. And it tells me that I've got 955 cells in column B that have something in them. Except, again, one of those is a column header, so I'll just say minus 1. And that's going to tell me how many districts, how many lines of district data do I have? 954. Now, to make this even easier, so I need that number in a moment. To make this even easier, I'm just going to give it a name. And I'm going to call this, actually, I think I will call this school underscore count. How many schools? Because as you see in the data, we've got the district many times, but each one of those is a school. So what that's going to give me is how many schools do I have? So in this data set, I have 954 schools. Okay, so I'm going to call it school count. So let's take a quick look at the problem we're trying to solve. So I know that I've got a group called districts, right? And right now, that range goes all the way down through UNM Members School. I'm going to add some more lines to this, and let's see what happens. So over here, I've got another sheet called More Data, appropriately enough, and I'm going to add some information. I'm going to add, I need to do a bit of cleanup here. Let me just grab all this right here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to drop it on the bottom. All right. Well, if I look at districts again, you'll see that those new lines are not included in that range. So if I'm going to do any calculations based on that, if I'm going to look at those data, the new ones are not included. So I've got to make that range automatically expand in order to accommodate the new ones. And let me just add some more of the data in there. What have we got? We've got more data. So 34 and 21, that's males and females. Males and females, which goes here. All right, this actually should be the total students. So let me just add those in right quick, all the way down through Zuni down. Let's get the free reduced lunch. So like I said, a lot of what I'm doing when I'm looking at data, the first thing I'm doing is clean up, which is what we're doing here. All right, so let's take this set right here. I think this is the one I want, or at least we can pretend that it's the one I want. Put it there. Go get the next set, more data. I don't know if I'm actually getting the right numbers, but it kind of doesn't matter. And let's do one more. All right, more data. And let's get this set right here. Okay, and put it, where am I putting it? right there. Okay. So let's figure out, how do we do this? How do we make our ranges flexible? And we have to use something very tricky called offset. Here's what offset looks like. And it's actually not too difficult once it's explained. So there's something called offset, which is OFFSET. And by definition, it means move something, right? Start at this place, move it to another place. So the way this works is, the first thing it's going to say is, what's your starting point, right? The next thing is, all right, from that starting point, how many rows down do we go? And how many columns across do we go? And this can be a plus or a minus. This can be a plus or a minus. It can also be a 0. Stay in the same row, stay in the same column, don't move, right? So we're going to give a starting point here, which is going to be a starting cell of some type. And from that point, how many rows do we go across? 10, for example. And how many columns do we go across? 0. It looks like this. And this is how we're going to solve the problem of variable data sets. So let me just drop it up here real quick. Offset, and then it's going to be starting point, the number of rows up or down, and the number of columns across. Let's see how it works. So let's say we're starting right here in E3. All right, let's try it. So let's say equals offset. What's my starting point? E3. All right. How many rows down do I want to go? Let's go down 2 rows. And how many columns do I want to go across? Let's call it 2. So if our starting point is at 364 and we go down 2 rows to 113 and we go across 2 rows, the result should be 53. We're taking that point, we are offsetting it by 2 rows down and 2 rows across. The number should be 53. Sure enough, it went from here to here. We went down 2 rows, and then we went across 2 rows from there. And that gave us 53. So down 2 and across 2 from there. That's how offset works. And we can use that in order to make our ranges flexible. So right now, we know that a range looks something like this. So a range is any named range. Oops, come on, Bowman. Big fingers. A named range has a definition. And the definition is, what's the starting point? All the way through the ending point. Well, to make our names flexible, this is always going to be the first cell in that column that we're using. But this is the one that needs to change. And we're going to use offset to do that. So we can give it a starting point. Let's say it's B3 through, and then how far down from B3 do we need to go? And we're going to use offset to do that. Through the offset of B3, how far down do we go? And how far across do we go? Well, we want to stay in that column. So we know that we're not going forward or backwards any columns. But this part right here, that's how many rows down do we want to go? And we've already figured out the answer to that. And that is the school count in this case. The count. So let's try it. So we have to go to our name manager. So let's take a look at our name manager. We have a range called districts. By definition, according to the name manager, districts means on the sheet called enrollment data, start at B3 and go all the way through B956. But that number is no longer true. That's where we need to go add the offset. So let's see how this goes. So that's B3 through B956. So instead of B3 through B956, we're going to say B, so offset, start with B3, that doesn't change, through, how many rows down do we want? Well, what value do we have up there in school count? If I can type, there we go. So let's try that again. So our first, so B3 is our starting point, comma, how many rows down? Oh, come on. School, this is getting silly. Count, that's how many rows down we go. And how many rows across? None, stay in the same one. We're going to use that to say, look, that number called school count might change. It might get bigger, it might get smaller if we add or subtract lines of data. But as long as we're just using whatever that value is, we're going to be okay. So by using that, first figuring out how many rows do we have, and then using it in our formula, when the number of rows changes, the definition for that range is also going to change. So let's try it. And I'm going to show you how we have to fix it because it's actually not going to be correct. It's going to get us very close, but with a little tiny tweak, we can fix that. So here's our enrollment data, and I'm going to just type down here in the bottom. This refers to B3 through the offset, starting at B3, go down school count, go down that many rows, and don't go forward or backwards any column. So that's a 0. Let me close that. Let's see what happens now. So now when I go to districts, let's see where it ends up now. Because before it ended up at UNM member school, right? But we've made it flexible. So let's see where it ends up now. Keep going. Too far. So there's our UNM member school, line 956. But you'll see the range called districts now goes all the way to the bottom. Right there. Now, as I mentioned, there's going to be a little problem. 80 to 83, unhide. Oh, they've got them smushed up. Silly PED. All right, we got some other ones in there. So districts. Oops. And we seem to have a problem. Did I make a problem? Let's check our formula. So districts is enrollment data B3 through, B started B3, go down by school count, go across by 0. All right, so there's our row. Let's see where it ends up now. Keep going, keep going. Look, it now includes all of the lines, but it went one too many. here's the problem. There are 900 and some cells, but the first one, the reference, that's not counted as one. When we say go down one, it goes to the next one. So if we're going down by the total number of lines, one is not the top. One is the second. So the whole thing is shifted down. We've got to take a one. We've got to back it up by one, basically. Well, it's very, very simple to do. So we've got our start. We've got rows down, and we need to just say one less and that many columns across. And that will fix it right here. So that's going to go down. This right here will take us down one too many. So we simply say, well, now back it up by one. So instead of going down 900 lines or whatever, go down 899. Back it up. And that will get rid of that extra little space at the bottom. So let's just fix that right quick. Named manager. So let me find districts. There it is, school count. Oops. Close and don't save. Do you want to save the changes? No. Let's try that again. And this is going to finish it up for today. So districts, school count. Come on, cursor, get right in there. -1. Close. So now when we do this, so I just said -1. The school count -1. And now our entire formula for districts is going to be enrollment data B3 through offset B3 again, school count -1, because we got to back it up 1, and across by 0. Let's see what it does now. And it should take us right to the bottom. Sure enough, there it is, line 980, Zuni middle.